This is Jonathan Aguilar here for Pro Boxing Fans, joined by Dan Rafael the day after an incredible night at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Dan, you were reporting on the fight all week long. I was reading your Substack. How's that going, first of all?
It's going good. It's a labor of love, but it's people seem to enjoy it. Can't really get a lot of boxing fans to agree on much of anything, but I've had nothing but positive feedback about it. So for all of those who read the Dan Rafael Fight Freaks Night Substack, I appreciate it.
Yep, and the link for anyone that wants to check out your report from last night, how do they find it?
Oh, just go on danrafael.substack.com, or you can certainly I post the links on my various social media on Facebook, Twitter, or X, Instagram, and they can pop on. All you got to do, really, it takes 2 seconds. You put your email address in, and you'll sign up for it. It'll come to your email, or you can just go on the website and just read it on your own without even signing up. So that's how that works.
Yeah, and I will put in a link in the description for people to check out as well. Right, Dan, yeah, chaos last night, really, all throughout the week, all throughout the fights. But yeah, what was your assessment of Chris Eubank Jr.'s win over Conor Benn?
I think it's the fight of the year so far. I was very clear about that in my report, as well as just when I was posting things as the fight was happening on social media. You just don't see much better action. Not just in a round here, a round there, or a short fight, but basically, unless I'm forgetting something, Jonathan, I think like pretty much every single round, all 12 rounds, were basically action packed. Like if you took the worst round of the fight, it was still better than a lot of fights that you see. I mean, they came out incredibly fast. Like I had like a moments in that first minute or so where I thought we're going to see a development of like a Hagler Hearns kind of fight because they just started to throw huge punches right at the bell. Now, most of the time, even when that happens, there's some element of things settle down. They get that initial burst and excitement out of the way, and 20, 30 seconds, a minute later, they go into more of of the game plan, so to speak. But while it did maybe slow down a little bit, they were bombing from the beginning and it really never stopped. I mean, it was a tremendous fight. And like I said, I think it's the fight of the year so far. I mean, there's other excellent fights. Somebody mentioned to me earlier, don't forget about the flyweight fight between Taraji and Akui that took place in Japan earlier in the year, and that's all well and good. But when you combined the family history, the action that actually unfolded in that fight between them, and then you put into account also the atmosphere and the surroundings and the crowd, it's really hard to top that.
In terms of how you scored the fight, how did you see it?
I had it the same as the judges, 116 to 112 in favor of Eubank. I thought it was a highly competitive fight. I think the mistake that some fans who may have been unhappy with the score make in some cases, and every fight is different, but when you see 116 to 112, some people would look at that and say, well, the guy that was the winner, won fairly comfortably, let's say, fairly easily. But that's not the reality. The reality is if you watch all 12 rounds, most of those rounds were highly competitive. Now, each guy had certain rounds where maybe they were more dominant than others, but by and large, those were close rounds. And, Eubank was just getting the edge in a few more of them. And there were some close ones. I mean, if you told me you had it 7-5, who could argue with that? I feel like those are the two logical scores, either 8-4 or 7-5 in Eubank's favor. If you really, really, really wanted to bend over backwards and give every conceivable benefit of the doubt, maybe to Conor Benn, maybe you could find a draw. I don't see a way that I don't say this with any disrespect to Conor Benn. I don't see a way you can find him winning 7 rounds of the fight. That's just not reality, in my opinion. But again, neither one of those guys got anything to be ashamed of. They put on one of the great fights you'll ever see. And I'll tell you one thing, it reminds me a little bit of some of the conversation that took place after Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward had their legendary first fight. That was a non-title fight. Just like this was a non-title fight. Yes, that was a 10-rounder. This was a 12-rounder. But the point I'd like to make about that is that when Gatti Ward were done with that first fight, it obviously led to a trilogy. And they became one of the most famous pairings in the history of boxing. Years later, if you ask somebody like, hey, you remember Gatti Ward? They're like, oh, wow, that's an unbelievable, incredible fight. Yeah, you remember what the scores were? Who won? Did Gatti win? No, Mickey won. Like, they don't remember or care who was the winner of the fight. And I feel like in terms of Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr., that years from now, and we'll see if it develops into a sequel, like probably a rematch or a trilogy, whatever the case may be. But there may come a time where people will more remember just a great fight, and that the actual result becomes less important and not as big of a part of the narrative.
In terms of Conor Benn, obviously, I think on Friday people started to favour him in the fight, given Eubanks the weight and missing the weight, and then the images he posted on social media. But it didn't feel like he was ever. At times he seemed to hurt Eubank, but he didn't seem to be able to finish him off. Why do you think that was the case? Was it just the size and Eubank was comfortable, or?
Well, I mean, I actually was one of those people that I originally, when I was sort of thinking about the fight in the week or two leading up to it, I was leaning towards Conor Benn. I'm sorry, I was leaning towards Chris Eubank, and it was sort of like the conventional wisdom. He's a much bigger guy. He's got way more experience. He's fought plenty of top guys. He's fought them at middleweight as well as super middleweight. And Conor was a fighter who was rising from welterweight. Essentially, I know he had two fights at junior middleweight, but they were not. One was not even a full junior middleweight, and neither one was against any kind of like top guy. And so, in my mind, you really was a welterweight against a middleweight who really was a super middleweight who had vast experience and fought plenty of quality fighters through the years, and that size does matter. Whatever you think their talent is, that unless they're the absolute elite, if you're Roy Jones at light heavyweight and you go to heavyweight and fight a guy that's just a guy in John Ruiz, that's one thing. But if you are at a certain level as a welterweight and you're fighting a similarly level guy at middleweight, or maybe better, chances are the bigger guy with the similar skill level is probably going to win the fight. Now, once I saw all the hoopla about the weight situation, and that I felt seeing those videos was no joke, plus talking to people that were around the fight in London during the week and around the Eubank camp, I was like, oh my goodness, this is not good. And I just didn't see how, especially with the rehydration, and he was an hour late for that also, that the later the fight goes, the less energy he's going to have, because that weight situation is going to sap him, even a little bit. And that may be an edge for Conor Benn. So I thought that Ben would win the fight, but Eubank showed a great chin and great resolve, and was not depleted to the extent where it really had that big of an impact. I mean, just imagine if he made the weight more comfortably, what kind of fight that would have been. I mean, that would have been probably a lot easier. The other thing about it is Conor just doesn't have the punching power as a middleweight. I mean, at welterweight, he scored a lot of great knockouts. There are some people that will say that was because he was using PEDs, whatever your position is on that. The reality is the two fights he had against, let's call them generously C-level opponents, never even bothered either guy with a shot. Neither came close to stopping or dropping either one of those fighters. So now he's fighting a better grade at middleweight. And even though he landed some very, very heavy punches, he never came close to scoring a knockout in that fight at all. And so, Eubank was able to take those shots, and he is a bigger guy, and he does have a good punch. And Conor Benn, to his credit, man, what an unbelievable chin he showed. I mean, there's no criticisms about these two guys. They put on a great fight. I mean, both of them showed the heart of champions, and made a very memorable fight for everybody. I mean, people will talk about this fight for decades and decades and decades. And if you ask me, maybe, and I don't want to be caught up in the moment, but I gave this some thought overnight. When you really get down to it, just action, round for round. Okay, granted, it wasn't a world championship fight, Jonathan, but I believe that this fight was better than their father's fights.
Mm.
Certainly better than the second fight. The rematch between Nigel and Chris Senior was a hell of a fight and higher stakes because it was a world championship unification. But the action was a really good fight. Let's not get crazy, but it was not as good as their first fight, and I don't believe it was as good as the fight that their sons produced. And I think that you can make the argument that while the stakes were less in terms of titles, that the Saturday fight that we just saw, you could even say might have been better than the first fight between the fathers, in part because of the fact that so much was riding on that fight between the sons because of what the fathers had done. So it gave it a greater sort of sense of atmosphere and all of that business. I mean, when the fathers fought the first time, they fought in a regular sized arena with a good crowd. They weren't fighting outdoors in front of 67,000 people. So I think that this fight's going to stand the test of time like the old man fights.
Now, to warrant a rematch is usually some sort of controversy, or it was a brilliant fight. However, we've seen it now, like you say, 116, 112. Some people had it closer, but Does this fight warrant a rematch, in your opinion?
Oh, I think it does. I mean, if they want to do it, obviously they have a contract that says there's going to be a rematch, but you can't. What's the old saying? I've never seen a contract fight. So, if the two sides are interested to do it, I know that Eubank had went to the hospital to have a potential broken jaw checked out, but at his post fight press conference, Conor Benn was asked about that, and he says if that's what we're going to do, that's what we're going to do. He would like to fight Mario Barrios for the WBC welterweight title, which would mean obviously going back down to his more natural weight class. But he basically said if it's a rematch with Chris, if it's a possible opportunity to fight for a world title against Barrios in the welterweight division, like I'll be content with what either, with either decision. So while it doesn't have to be like even if they didn't have the contractual stipulation of a rematch, that type of fight would warrant a rematch for a million reasons. Not the least of which is a humongous, even more money in the rematch than they were able to make in the first fight. B, you can't tell me that they wouldn't draw another crowd of 67,000 plus at Tottenham or Wembley or wherever they would put the match. That's the name of the game. I mean, they would draw huge crowds, and it would make money for the promoters and make money for the fighters and give the fans something they want. It kind of hits all the marks. So I would certainly understand why they did a rematch. And a lot of rematches, that's the way they should be. There shouldn't have to be a contractual stipulation. You should see a fight, and if the public so-called demands it, or there's interest from the broadcasters or the promoters or the media or certainly the fans, that's the reason you do rematches. That's why Mickey Ward and Arturo Gatti fought 3 fights in a row, because the interest was there, right? That's why Israel Vasquez and Rafael Marquez fought 3 remarkable fights back to back to back, because they were absolutely sensational world championship fights. And there's plenty of other series that may not have been immediate rematches, but they certainly had rematches. I mean, you ever heard Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali, or Barrera and Morales? I mean, we can go chapter and verse. So yeah, absolutely, a fight like that is the leader in the clubhouse for fight of the year, certainly would warrant a rematch.
Yeah, true. If like you say, the rematch doesn't happen, which we probably think it will happen given the reasons you just said, do you think Ben would beat Mario Barrios? Like, where does he rank in within the welterweights? Jaron Ennis has 2 belts, but is it hard to tell after last night, or?
Well, the one thing about it is the fact that he's able to take the punches that he did in terms of the chin that he showed. If he could take those kind of shots against Chris Eubank, who's a full-fledged middleweight and really should be fighting probably even a little bit heavier than that, I would think he'd be able to take the punches from some of the welterweights. Now, Mario Barrios, for example, that's the guy he singled out. He said WBC because that was one of the belts that his father won in his career that he really covets. And so while Mario Barrios is a good fighter, I don't think he is that kind of puncher, even as a welterweight. So I think that Chris, in terms of, or rather Connor, being able to take those punches, I think that would be fine. I think that would be a good fight. I mean, Mario Barrios has been in a lot of entertaining fights. He's fought good opponents. He did lose to Gervonta Davis at 140 pounds and got stopped in that fight. But that was a really good matchup while it was happening, and he's certainly matured since then. I feel like he's gotten better since then. He's coming off a hellacious battle that was this past fall that turned out to be a draw. That was one of the fights on the Jake Paul Mike Tyson undercard. But I can understand why I would see no reason why they couldn't make that fight. Now, the only thing that you have to think about is I'm not sure where Connor is in the WBC ratings. I'm not sure what the interest level is on Team Barrios's behalf. But the thing that's sort of sitting out there is that there's this possibility that Barrios may end up fighting Manny Pacquiao at some point, which would be unfortunate. But that's something that's sort of a possibility. But either way, Conor Benn absolutely can compete with the top welterweights in the division, in my opinion.
Just lastly on this fight, we saw Chris Eubank Senior arrive with his son, which was a surprise to many. Was it a surprise to you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was. I wasn't expecting that. I mean, when you hear a father say the kinds of things that Chris Senior was saying, not only about the fight, but about his own son in the buildup, it obviously made it seem as though that he, I'm sure he was going to watch the fight, but I didn't necessarily think he would be there. But then again, when you think about it, it's sort of the nature of Chris Eubank Senior, the kind of guy he is, um, it would kind of hard for him to stay away from that kind of event. So it's like Conor Benn said afterwards. If that fight was able to bring father and son back together after years of estrangement, then that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing to have family reunited like that for that situation. So hopefully, whatever the issues have been through the years between Chris and his son, that they're able to get past it and put it aside, because at the end of the day, that's your family.